Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Phil Johnson, who's calling in from the Toronto, Canada area, while I'm recording from the island of St. Bartholomew in the Caribbean today, where I'm testing the ability to work and podcast remotely from around the world. I'm really excited about my guest today because we're going to be talking about a subject that we haven't spoken about before. And that's emotional intelligence and the importance of emotional intelligence. And I could think of no better person than Phil Johnson, who's overcome tremendous amount of adversity in his life since childhood to prove that emotional intelligence matters more than IQ. And so Phil is the founder of the a master of business leadership program. The founder of a master of business leadership program, which he has created. And so, Phil, welcome to the show today.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Oh, thanks so much. So, well, let's just jump right into it and talk about what is emotional intelligence and how is it developed?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. A real easy way to understand emotional intelligence is it's the ability to feel the fear and anxiety that change and innovation triggers in us and move through it towards what it is we're trying to achieve, as opposed to allowing that fear and anxiety to keep us trapped in our comfort zones.
That's pretty simple and pretty interesting, and not exactly what I would have thought would be the definition of emotional intelligence. I would have thought it was your ability to read people, your ability to sense maybe where they're coming from and their differences, and being more open in that sense. And so I would have summed it up by using the word that Pat Lencioni used in his book, The Ideal Team Player, where he talks about people being smart. And he says people, he doesn't mean smart like intellectually smart. He means like people intelligent smart. So help me, course correct me if I've, or fine tune what I'm saying if I've missed something here.
Yeah, that's you're right. What Pat said and what you're saying is correct, but those are the byproducts of learning to move through the fear and anxiety that change and innovation triggers in us. And as you do that, you become more conscious of what's going on inside of you and what's going on inside of other people. But those are outcomes from doing the work that I described.
Okay, so can someone develop more emotional intelligence? Is it something that we're born with? Is it, or is something that can be developed, like leadership skills or like sales skills can be developed? And yet maybe we're born with a certain aptitude towards leadership or a certain aptitude towards sales. So tell me about how do you mature into more emotional intelligence? Is it possible?
Yes, it absolutely is. And as a matter of fact, emotional intelligence is developed. It's an experiential process, and it's very different from intellectual intelligence. And the ROI from developing emotional intelligence is far greater than intellectual intelligence. Let me just give you a kind of a quick numeric example. Think of intellectual intelligence as somebody giving you $10,000 a day for 31 days. At the end of 31 days, you've got $310,000. Now think of emotional intelligence, the development of our emotional intelligence, as a penny that doubles in value every day for 31 days. So day one, you've got a penny. Day two, you've got 2 pennies. Day 31, you've got $10.7 million. Day 40, you've got over 5 billion. Day 50, you've got over 5 trillion. So whereas our ability to do intellectual labor is genetic, if you have a high IQ, your parents had a high IQ, their parents had a high IQ, and you inherited those genes. So whereas not everybody can have 160 IQ, everybody can develop their emotional intelligence, and the results, the ROI is massive. As a matter of fact, there was a 40-year study done at UC Berkeley, comparing intellectual intelligence with emotional intelligence, and they determined that emotional intelligence is 400% more valuable in determining career, corporate, and personal success than intellectual intelligence. And as a matter of fact, if you want, I can give you an example of a corporation that's currently valued at about $3 trillion, and they're doing about $500 to $600 billion a year in revenue, and their primary hiring focus is emotional intelligence.
That's amazing. And what about the legality, by the way, of using emotional intelligence assessments in the hiring process? Is it just the same as what goes for like using DISC or Myers-Briggs? It has to be just part of the whole process, but it can't be it's almost discriminatory if that's your only tool.
The more emotionally intelligent you are, the more emotionally intelligent, the easier it is you can spot it in somebody else or the lack of it. And it's a critical set of capabilities that we need now more than ever because of the accelerating rate of global change. Our educational system has failed us, and our employment system has failed us by focusing primarily on our ability to do intellectual labor, and they've done little or nothing to develop our emotional intelligence. And because we're facing a tsunami of change with a 500 million year old brain that doesn't like change, the development of our emotional intelligence represents the future of organizational development.
Okay, so that's why it's especially important now. And you're saying anyone can develop their emotional intelligence. Are you suggesting that emotional intelligence also can guarantee personal, career, and corporate success?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So let's talk about how we develop emotional intelligence. And maybe we need to still distinguish between emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence. And so let's start with what's the difference between the two a little bit more. And
great question.
Yeah.
The development of emotional intelligence is an experiential process. So in other words, you can't develop emotional intelligence by having a conversation or reading a book or watching a video. Those are intellectual processes. The development of emotional intelligence is based on what you do. As a matter of fact, what you do will change what you think. Thinking doesn't change doing. Doing changes thinking. It changes the story we tell ourselves. So you can only appreciate the value and importance of emotional intelligence by taking the initial leap of faith of beginning the process of learning how to do that. And there's only two sources of motivation that will cause us to be willing to leave our comfort zone in the pursuit of better results. One is pain, the other one is passion. And hardly anybody's connected with their passion. So for the most part, the motivation that causes people to want to leave their comfort zone is a urgent desire for better results or pain. So that kind of, think of that as the fuel for the journey. If you don't have a vision, if you don't have an emotional connection with a desired result that's stronger than the fear that's going to get triggered in you when you move outside of your comfort zone, you won't be willing to do the emotional labor that the development of your emotional intelligence requires. You may want better results, but you won't be willing to do the work that better results requires.
So it occurs to me that most people probably know whether they're intellectually intelligent or not. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that few people know whether they're emotionally intelligent or not. What,
Jonathan, you're absolutely correct. People don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. So what would be some hallmark signs, signatures of emotional intelligence? What would that look like?
Well, for one thing, the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more your behavior and results inspire followers.
Okay.
People feel safer in your presence, in your energy. And the reason for that is because, well, this gets into energy physics.
That's all right.
We've evolved over, pardon?
We can go there. That's okay.
Okay, I'll do that. Let me just make this comment, and then I'll take you there. We've evolved over hundreds of millions of years from living in caves and tribes, and so we've had to develop the ability to sense whether somebody's trying to help us or eat us. So we've developed these specialized brain cells in our prefrontal cortex that brain scientists call mirror neurons. I call them bullshit meters.
Okay.
That's why you can walk into a room and sense the energy in the room, or you can have a conversation with somebody and sense whether they're trying to help you or hurt you. So as you become more emotionally intelligent, you also become more of an inspirational leader that attracts followers. So let me get to the energy physics.
And then, by the way, I totally understand that, and I see it. I have clients who have what I would call high EQ, and they inspire followership, and they are not like, they seem like great leaders. And then I have clients who don't have what I would call high EQ, and they have trouble creating followership. Right. So it seems pretty intuitive to me, and I have some tools to take assessments around emotional intelligence. Target Training International, which is an assessment partner of mine, offers an EQ assessment instrument, but I've never done much work in correlating what I experience to be emotional intelligence, high and low, with the results of their assessment.
Yeah, what I'm about to explain with regards to energy physics is going to help to connect those dots for you.
Great.
But most people aren't actually willing to do the emotional labor that the development of leadership and emotional intelligence requires. So what they do instead, if they're not willing to change themselves, they rely on some type of position-based power to control, manipulate others to get them to change. And that creates the toxic work environments that we see everywhere. And that's why the current level of employee engagement worldwide, according to Gallup, is around 13%. Low levels of employee engagement are costing U.S. economy over $1 trillion a year. And that's why over 80% of all M&A initiatives and organizational development initiatives fail. And let me get to the energy physics behind all of this. So we're only conscious about 3 to 5% of the time. The rest of the time, we're relying on our habits to determine our behavior and our results. And that's fine. But when we're born, we're not born with a conscious mind. We are born with an unconscious mind. We don't actually start to become conscious until we're about a year or so old. But we immediately start creating the pathways, the neural network pathways that become our habits in order to survive, fit in, get food, all those kinds of things. And a lot of those habits unconsciously are causing us to give away our energy. And we do it in a myriad of ways: how we communicate, listen, take responsibility, make decisions, all sorts of ways. But when we're giving away our energy over here, it creates an energy deficit in us. So at the same time we're giving away our energy over here, we have to be trying to replace that energy by trying to steal energy from other people over here. And that dynamic is going on inside of everybody, everywhere, all over the world, all the time. And that is the root cause of all drama, chaos, and conflict. So what I do in the MBL program is I show people how they're unconsciously giving away their energy, and I give them better habits to practice to stop doing that. And when they stop giving away their energy, their need to steal the energy of other people goes away because they don't need it. And it's in that process that they develop their emotional intelligence, they become more inspirational leaders, they become more conscious of what's going on in them and around them, they become freer from their ego-based fear, which leads to higher levels of trust and engagement, which guarantees career, corporate, and personal success. So all of those things I just mentioned are the outcomes of learning to stop giving away your energy.
So let's go back to the first thing you said when we started the podcast, because we're circling back there. We're talking about, you said fear and anxiety are what cause people, let's say leaders, to not expand their emotional intelligence,
to not leave their comfort zone.
And
that's one of the three primary sources of resistance we have to change. And I'll let me explain what they are, if you don't mind.
Please.
Okay. So two are biological, one's sociological. The first one is there's a part of our old lizard brain called the amygdala, which has been trying to keep us safe and alive for the last 500 million years by making sure we never leave our cave. And if we do, or our comfort zone, if we do, it automatically triggers the release of a hormone called cortisol into our bloodstream. And that causes the executive center of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, to shut off, and we go into what psychologists refer to as an amygdala hijack, which causes us to say and do things we often later regret. Some people lash out, some people run away, some people freeze like a deer in the headlights. And when that happens in conflict situations, people die. And when it happens in business or personal situations, relationships die. We burn trust. So as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet the amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the fear and anxiety that changing innovation triggers in us and move through it towards what it is we're trying to achieve, as opposed to allowing that fear to keep us trapped in our comfort zones. So that's the first source of biological resistance. The second is our existing habits. Once we develop a habit, it's there forever. It's a neural network pathway we create in our brain. And although we can develop new habits at any age, it's called brain plasticity or neurogenesis, those new habits are always going to be weaker than the old habits, because when we're younger, there's an insulation layer that goes around the neural network pathway called myelin. And when we're younger, it's thicker than when we're older. So there's going to be an ongoing battle internally within us between our old and new habits for control, for dominance, even though the new habits may work a lot better than the old habits. The third source of resistance is sociological, meaning the people around us don't want us to change. Because if we change and start to get better results, maybe they're going to have to change, and that scares the heck out of them. And the best way to ensure they don't have to change is to make sure we fail, so they can say, look, I told you so, now shut up and get your head down and come back into the herd with the rest of us. So even though the MBL program works like hell, I've coached executives and organizations all over the world for the last 22 years. Unless you have an emotional connection to a desired result that's stronger than your fear, you won't be willing to do the emotional labor required to get those benefits. And quite frankly, most people don't have that level of emotional connection or pain to achieve better results.
Bill, there's so much to unpack here. I can understand why you've created a a master's program to help people unpack it. It's just, there's so much to understand. And I've had some dealings with people whose behavior is really hard to understand. It seems to be fueled out of maybe addiction or emotional problems, behavioral problems, things that were not corrected in childhood, maybe because of genetics. And these people show up in the workplace, and they are clearly toxic and dangerous. And there are people who just are not sometimes in touch with their emotional state well enough to be able to regulate it. And this becomes a really big problem. And the assessment instrument that TTI has does look at emotional regulation and social regulation as key factors. And so I'm beginning to think.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, please.
You're absolutely correct. This might be a little what I'm about to say might be a little unnerving for your listeners. Matter of fact, I'm sure it will be. And I guess I apologize for that. But some scientists estimate that in this century, we're going to experience the equivalent of roughly 20,000 years worth of change, or 200 centuries worth of change. So change is increasing at an exponential rate. And as I say, we have both strong biological and sociological resistance to change that's been developed over hundreds of millions of years. And if we don't develop our emotional intelligence to deal with the fear and anxiety that change and innovation triggers in us, quite frankly, I think we're at a tipping point as a species on the planet. I think that we're going to have a very difficult time surviving this century without the development of our emotional intelligence.
Wow. That's a pretty heavy and lofty statement. Do you find, I mean, are there certain cultures where people are more emotionally intelligent, or
No,
races,
no,
or certain, no. So
no.
it's a completely individualistic thing, you're saying?
There are, I've worked with executives organizations all over the world, and it's no different anywhere.
Okay.
The essential component to begin the journey of developing our emotional intelligence is an emotional connection with the desired result that fuels us to move outside of our comfort zone. That's the only prerequisite.
Okay.
But it's got to be there, because without it, you don't have a chance. It's just too hard.
It goes back to, I think, that base simple expression: if there's a will, there's a way.
And if somebody can talk you out of doing something, let them, because it wasn't that important. It wasn't that important enough to you anyhow.
Let's talk about the ROI that you're seeing. I know you talked a little bit about a Berkeley study. I'm more interested, maybe I'm interested in that, but I may be more interested in your anecdotal stories and experience, maybe with return on investment, either financial bottom lines or maybe increases in scores in their Gallup Q12 or whatever, employee engagement. And I do talk about, I have seen some of the Gallup studies, and I have used that in a video. And there's no question, I've personally experienced clients who have leaders where their higher emotional intelligence and create more followership, get better results. But tell me, you must have like a ton of data, whether it's anecdotal or not, or the study. Take us through some of that.
Learning to stop giving away your energy improves everything in your career, in your personal life, in your corporations. I've helped executives double or triple their compensation. I've helped organizations generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Uh, it just, it is, think of it this way. Learning to stop giving away our energy, developing the habits that enable us to stop giving away our energy. And I'll give you some examples. Is the root cause solution to everything. It's the root cause solution to all drama, chaos, and conflict everywhere in the world. And I've been proving that everywhere in the world for the last 22 years. So you can pick any metric you want. The development, learning how to stop giving away your energy improves that metric.
How do you know if you're giving away your energy or not?
You become less conscious. The people that give away their energy don't know it.
Right.
Because what they do with raising their walls, they become more resistive, more judgmental, more attached to outcome. They become blind to what's going on in them and around them. As they learn to stop giving away their energy, they become more conscious of what's going on in them and around them as they become less resistive, less judgmental, less attached to outcome. So it's interesting. I often, as executives are going through the MBL program, they're going, holy smokes, this stuff's amazing. And I say, yeah, I know. But let me ask you something. Is there anything I could have said to you in the beginning before you started down this path that could have prepared you for what you know now? And every single person I ask that question to always says no. There's nothing you could have, there's no magic words. There's nothing you could have told me in advance that could have helped me to understand what I understand now. And you see, that's the difference between knowing something intellectually and knowing something experientially. The development of emotional intelligence is not an intellectual process, it's an experiential process. And you can only connect the dots after you've taken the initial leap of faith of going down the path.
Super interesting. I mean, I'm fascinated by this subject, and I feel that I know so little about it except what I intuitively, I think, understand. So
you and the rest of the world, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
People don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
The less they know, the more they think they know. The more they know, the less they think they know.
Well, that's true. So I'm going to make an offer. I never make offers on these shows, but I'm going to make an offer that if anyone of my listeners here is interested in getting an EQ assessment, I can run one. It's a nominal cost for me. I just would ask that we talk about the results together. I'd be really interested in see.
Sure.
I don't imagine I'll have more than 10 respondents, but hey, that would be really interesting to have 10 conversations around the results of their EQ. It'd be great learning for me. So
absolutely.
So tell me about this Master in Business Leadership program. What's involved if someone wants to?
Well, it's initially the MBL program is a 16-week program where we get together once a week for an hour. It's a teaching and coaching process where I give people the tools and the habits to practice, and then we review the results on a weekly basis to see to track the changes. So there's homework, and I'm available on a 24/7 basis for any questions or comments people may have as they go through the program. I'm like a Sherpa.
Gotcha. And I didn't mean to, if I did preempt you, do you use any kind of pre and post benchmark assessment, or
Yeah, I do. I have a questionnaire that I start people off with that kind of gets them thinking about things that they maybe have never thought about. I'm trying to raise their level of consciousness, I'm trying to raise their level of awareness of what's going on in them and around them. And I also have an EQ evaluation that I give them during the process, and then we do it again later on um, to kind of see the changes. Um, and there are executives and organizations that I've been working with for over 13 years globally because the ROI never ends.
Well,
As you learn to master these habits,
yes,
as you learn to become more conscious, the ROI increases exponentially.
like that penny every day that
Correct.
multiplies quite a
It's most difficult in the beginning because people don't know what they don't know,
right.
and they don't have any awareness, they don't have any belief, they don't have any results. So it really requires an initial leap of faith. But as they start down the path and they start to get better results, their belief increases dramatically, and they're going, "Where? How come I didn't get this? I mean, I'm a successful, blah blah blah. I mean, I didn't know any of this stuff."
Yeah.
And it's really because we should have been taught this from birth, and our educational system has completely failed to prepare us for the tsunami of change we're facing. Change is never We've never ever been in a situation where change is increasing at an exponential rate, and we are completely unprepared for the accelerating rate of change we're facing.
Well, Phil, it seems like I read your bio just before we started the show, and it seems like you're someone who has overcome quite a bit of well, I don't know what to say, obstacles, challenges, and I mean, you talked a little bit about dyslexia. You lost your mother and father at very early ages. You were failing out of grade 3 and failing out of grade 5. You were dismissed as a slow learner. Um, you grew up basically in a what seemed like a very rural area, uh, dirt roads, living off of, being fed by the milkman, the bread man, the egg man, the potato man. I mean, you started working, sorry, at a very young age to make for allowance money. You were working in factories, I guess, producing boxcars. And so Phil, I don't know, you can jump in at this point, but you've overcome quite a bit of adversity in your life, and I think it's contributed to you doing this body of work that you've created.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, Jonathan. Um, the my dis Having had the good fortune of being born with dyslexia and the challenges that I faced at an early stage in my life, um, really forced me to do a lot of the emotional labor of moving outside of my comfort zone in the pursuit of better results. And really, that's what's required from all of us. There's no shortcut, there's no silver bullet. The development of emotional intelligence and inspirational leadership is like Navy SEAL training for our emotions. It's much
Great.
more difficult than intellectual labor or physical labor, but the ROI is incredible. It's massive and never ending.
Well, I love that analogy. There's like Navy SEALs training for your emotions. So, all right, well, Phil, we're going to wrap up here. This was great spending time with you. If people want to learn more about you or about your program, where would you like to send them?
Yeah, I think I've given you a link to my Zoom calendar.
We'll
Um, And I would be happy to meet with anybody and continue the conversation with anybody that has an interest.
Okay. So Phil Johnson, master of the Business Leadership Program. Folks, thanks so much for staying with us. I hope this had a pretty big impact on you and that you're interested in learning more about your emotional intelligence and how it creates or fosters leadership and how that might be tied to the return on your money, the return on your work, the return on your labor, and your team's efforts. So I do believe Phil is talking about stuff that is transformative in terms of ROI. Gallup certainly has done some research around it and proved it. And so, I hope you'll check out, learn a little bit more about Phil Johnson, as well as if you're interested in take that assessment, reach out to me and let me know if you want an assessment. So, all right, folks, you know the drill. If you like this show, if you got some benefit out of it, please tell others, share about it, give us a great rating, review, and over and out. Stay tuned to future episodes. Thank you. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.